A to Z Training Concept, a Jim Wagner article, narrated by me, Alden Brooke. Unlike traditional-based or sport-based martial arts, one of the most important components of reality-based personal protection is the concept of A to Z training. There are 3 stages for realistic conflict training. 1. A realistic starting point. 2. Technique performance. And 3. A reasonable finishing point. Just as when reciting the Latin alphabet, where we start from the letter A and work our way to the end with the letter Z, so also does life follow a linear pathway, and so should self-defense drills. This concept can best be illustrated with an incident that occurred in Canada several years ago and just recently in Finland. I'm sure there are countless other unreported occurrences, but those involved were either too embarrassed to report them or they didn't survive the encounters. A uniformed Canadian police constable was on patrol, and he was an avid martial artist. A criminal came up to him and pointed a live pistol in the constable's face. Before the suspect could pull the trigger, the officer flawlessly did a gun disarm and safely pulled the weapon from the suspect's hand. Tragically, without even thinking, the constable handed the loaded pistol back to the suspect a few moments later. Without a word being uttered, the suspect gladly took the weapon back. When the constable realized what he had just done, which was obviously the wrong thing to do, he immediately tried to retake the weapon. Unfortunately, the second time around, the suspect pulled the trigger that sent a bullet smashing into the constable's shoulder. Despite his injury, the constable had the will to survive, and he kept fighting, and he managed to once again pry the pistol from the suspect's hand and follow up with an arrest. So why did the constable in this story give the pistol back to the suspect after a successful gun disarm? That's right, you guessed it. The constable had done the moves repeatedly during training, and he ended up falling back on his training in a real incident. He properly conditioned himself to disarm someone pointing a weapon at him, but he also conditioned himself to hand the firearm back to his training partner immediately after the technique was performed. His muscle memory, which is repetition that commits a movement to be a conditioned response, inadvertently conditioned him to give a dangerous weapon back to a hostile. Not long after I had heard about the Canadian constable giving the criminal's gun back to him, I was in Finland training the top defensive tactics instructors of all 5 precincts of the Helsinki Police Department, and they informed me of a similar incident that happened to a police officer in Finland. This officer was also a defensive tactics instructor who should have known better. The Finnish police officer successfully disarmed an armed suspect and then handed the pistol back to him without even thinking. He was going off of his muscle memory. This alarming incident was discussed at length among the instructor cadre at Finland's National Police Academy in Tampere, and they took some responsibility for the incident. They realized that some of the traditional martial arts training methods that had been mixed in with police defensive tactics training, hybrid training that they had been giving to recruits and seasoned officers for years, had almost got a police officer killed. They came to the conclusion that corrective training was needed to prevent other officers from making the same mistake. In a moment, you'll be told what the training procedure should be when it comes to gun disarms, based on the changes made by my Finnish colleagues. But first, there's a question that every martial artist must ask himself or herself, and that is, if this can happen to experienced police officers, those who fight for a living, how much more can it happen to civilian martial arts practitioners who may rarely face violence? Besides gun disarms, how many other bad habits are you conditioning yourself for a disaster? Whenever you practice any conflict technique, you should always perform it from start to finish, from A to Z. For example, again using gun disarms as our teaching example, nobody is going to just materialize in front of you, pointing a gun. There will be some sort of indicator prior to the assault, such as the suspect approaching you and then pointing a gun at you. In a real situation, you would not intentionally hand the weapon back to the suspect. In a real situation, you're going to take self-preservation action, such as running away, shooting the suspect with the disarmed weapon, using the pistol as an impact weapon if it doesn't fire, or discard the weapon. So, how did the police instructor cadre change their gun disarm training to avoid the past mistake of giving the weapon back to the bad guy. Here's how. Instead of giving the weapon back to the trainer each time a gun disarm is performed, the trainee will complete the gun disarm, get to a point of safety, be it taking a few steps back or getting to cover, and maintain possession of the pistol the entire time. Then, instead of giving the pistol back to the trainer, the trainee now assumes the new role of the suspect. This way, the gun is never given back to the bad guy and no bad habits are being conditioned. The second method is for the trainee to disarm the bad guy, role-played by the trainer, step away with the training gun, and place it on the ground. Once on the ground, the trainee backs away from it. The trainer, who will again play the role of suspect, will walk up to the grounded training gun, pick it up, and do the attack again. Be a hard target,